Hello again, YouTube. This is Lovell Hawes, prior enlisted Marine, and overall just researching a lot of things and with questions. Before we get started with this one, I wanted to get a little philosophical with you. I maintain that immigration without assimilation is invasion. And that being said, I'm going to cite another historic example here, as I often do. When it came to what is now the United States, the tribes throughout the country actually had an open borders policy, and there was no assimilation. This resulted in invasion and the destruction of many, many rich cultures. It also resulted in many people being scattered to the winds and relocated forcefully. That being said, it comes to my why question. Why is it important to fight the invasion on the Ukrainian border, but not the one on our border? Assimilation in modern immigration and modern American immigration terminology has been considered racist. However, at the very least, I would actually prefer that it's like, at least let us know who is coming in. A small scale example is you would not simply leave your door open and just let anybody wander into your house. You would at least want to get to know who was coming into your house. You wouldn't just go, come right in. But that is basically what is going on a national scale on our own southern border. There is, as I've understand, another immigration caravan coming. And yet, do we know who any of these people are? Are they the good people of these countries, or are they the not so good ones? We honestly don't know. And when they get here, what do? In some cases, they actually demand that we conform to their standards. There are sections within New York City, for example, where basically Islamic immigrants actually basically practice Sharia law right within our own borders, not consistent with the constitutional law that we are familiar with. And while, yes, it is good that these people come and enrich our country, I just recently made a video just yesterday to actually talk about how we can bring our strengths together. But we have to work as a whole in order to do this. Not American culture, Native American culture, not Hispanic culture. Screw that. One American culture. Period. With all of that having been said, it goes back to my original question. Why is it we're looking at potentially World War III protecting Ukrainian borders while we're not worried about our own? And that seems like a contradiction to me, especially given the original philosophy that I just laid out. Immigration without assimilation is invasion. And like I said, in American history, when English and French and Spanish settlers came to the Americas, they did not assimilate at all. They displaced. They displaced or they destroyed the existing cultures. That includes the Monacan Nation here in Amherst County, Virginia. One in which, and you can check this with a tribal genealogist, that I have kinship with. And it has actually resulted in over 200 years the Monacan nation attempting to get national recognition from the United States federal government ever since there was one. Ever since there was a U.S. federal government, and they got it in 2017. Only 5 years ago. And the 2 centuries prior to it, there was times where in Virginia's history, there was legally no such thing as what was then termed as an American Indian. The law actually was written with some of my own family in mind. One of my own family members was in the report, one whom I know my exact relationship to the person. It was taken to Richmond because at the time, the Monacan nation, as is now, is in some ways even more ethnically diverse than the United States itself. It had accepted members, people who had escaped slavery in the Underground Railroad. It had accepted white people. It had accepted, and of course, it had its own Native American background. And as a result, when a certain politician came to see this, he found what he deemed whites, Indians, and Negroes together, and he found it completely unacceptable. That was a racist act. And he went back to Richmond and used the bigotry against black people of the time to actually create a law that said there was no such thing as an American Indian in Virginia. And that did more damage to the Native Americans than it did to anybody else. If you could pass for white like my part of the tribe could, you did, and you suppressed knowledge of your tribe. My mother had to rediscover it in the 90s because her own mother, my grandmother, had no idea. If you could pass for black, that was still better than being a Native American, because at least then you was allowed in the black schools. If you were a Native American, you were not allowed in either. You were just plain screwed. If it was obvious that you were neither, you were not allowed in either school. Because you were not white, you could not go to the white school. Because you were not black, you were not allowed to go to the black school. And because there was no such thing as an American Indian by law, there was no reservations at the time. There was no way for a Monacan to preserve his or her heritage. Not easily, at least. It was another example of where rich and cultured history was destroyed because there was no assimilation at the beginning. In 1607, when the colony of Jamestown was founded, they did not integrate with the Powhatan Indians, what they called the Powhatan Indians at the time, part of the Algonquin tribes. And the Algonquin tribes did what we are doing now. They helped them. In many cases, they often gave food that would normally go to filling their bellies to the colonists. They did the same thing at Plymouth. The first Thanksgiving had more Native Americans than it did settlers. And yet, there was no assimilation. Both the Algonquin tribes here in Virginia and the Native American tribes up in Massachusetts were deposed and destroyed. And granted, there was peace treaties in some cases that lasted more than the lifetime of the people who wrote them. With Plymouth, there was. But as inevitably happens when you've got two people that hold themselves in different regard, peace only lasts as long as the people who are determined to make it happen happens. Now, that would have completely changed the course of the United States if assimilation had happened from the settlers. If the colonists at Plymouth had integrated in with the tribes there. If the Jamestown colonists had integrated with the Powhatans. But that is history. We cannot change that. We can only learn from it and attempt to change the course of future history. Going with immigration without assimilation will result in the displacement and destruction of our own culture, our own history. It may even scatter us to the wind once again. Having been part of a bloodline that has endured it once, I'd rather not my future relatives to have to say the same thing I'm saying now, warning you, the you that will be of the future, of this yet again. We need to learn this lesson now. Immigration without assimilation is invasion. So why can't we protect our border like the Ukrainians are protecting theirs? Why is it a big deal that we support the Ukrainians while they protect their borders, while we do nothing with ours? Why was it racist to build a border wall? To at least get to know the people that are coming in. To make sure that at least the people that we are receiving are the good ones. There are good people and bad ones within our very borders. In certain neighborhoods, even in my own hometown, you may find yourself get robbed. There's actually a record of that where a Domino's delivery driver got robbed right here in small town Buena Vista. Now, granted, that was a few years ago. There was only a couple months, less than 2 months ago, there was 2 premature deaths believed to be murders. 2 separate incidents. And that was shocking. Because Buena Vista does not have a population of over 10,000 people. We have not had incidents like this in years. Honestly, I wouldn't have wanted the people who do that come into my house. And certainly not take from my refrigerator without putting something back in it. So, I would at least prefer that we get to know the people who come to our country. Get to and if they stay here, they integrate in and amongst us. Learn of the good parts and the bad of our history, and try to make a mark on our history that is good. This has been Lovell Hawes, and this one has been a little bit of a pouring out of my heart here. And I welcome any discussion in the comment sections below. Thank you for your time, and I'll happily answer any questions you have of me. You have a good day now.